Welcome to a new video and a new camera comparison between the Huawei P50 Pro against the Xiaomi 12S Ultra. So let's get started. So let's check out the camera specs first. And here we have the cameras, and as you can see here we have the 1-inch sensor here on the Xiaomi 12S Ultra and two 48 megapixel sensors. We have a 50 megapixel sensor on the P50 Pro. It also has a monochrome sensor, and it also has a telephoto and ultra wide angle. And on paper I think the Xiaomi 12S Ultra is winning. On the back, on the front not so much, because both feature a 32 megapixel shooter, but the P50 Pro has autofocus here. So I think we start with the front-facing cameras. So this is front-facing video on the Xiaomi 12S Ultra, 1080p 30 frames per second only, so this is a slight bummer, I would say. Otherwise, in terms of stabilization and the angle of view that you see here, I think it would be very okay for vlogging. And also the colors are okay, even though I think HDR could be a little bit better. Let's compare it with the P50 Pro. And this is now the P50 Pro and its front-facing camera. This one has 4K 30, but it can go 4K 60 if I want to. And this is the default 0.8 times. If I want to go wider, I can go wider to the ultra-wide angle. This is a bit more wobbly, I would say. If I hold it with two hands or like this, it should be okay. But yeah, what do you think about this front-facing camera here on the P50 Pro? It also has autofocus. I can zoom in 1 times even if I want to. So this is 1 times, maybe I have to go a little bit further away. This is the most stable one. You get a little bit of background blur as well, I think. And yeah, the flexibility is pretty good. And yeah, 0.8 time is the one that I like to use. And if I want to, I have even autofocus. So I can show you my the Neko cakes here that I use for let's go maybe with the sun. The Neko cakes that I use here for my true wireless headphones. So you can see that autofocus is working fine as well. I think I see a little bit more blue in the sky there, so HDR should be a little bit better. In general, the P50 Pro still has one of the best front-facing cameras on the market. So now I'm recording with the Xiaomi 12S Ultra and its main 1-inch size sensor, which is I think the pinnacle of smartphone sensors right now, the Sony IMX989. And this one I think produces a nice background blur, has good HDR, even the sun now in the background. And I have also the possibility to just go to the ultra wide angle if I want to, so I can simply zoom out. And now I'm at the ultra wide angle, and the ultra wide angle gives me a very ultra wide angle field of view, and I can use it for vlogging as well if I want to. And of course I also have, with 4K 30 that I'm recording here right now, the possibility to zoom in. So let me zoom in on this one building there. So let's do this here. Now we switch to the 1 time, and let's switch to 4 times, and now 5 times. Now it's switched the lenses. You can see a slightly different color cast, and let's go up here to 15 times maximum zoom. You can see it's very stable, and pretty much you can see some balconies there as well. So I think the detail level is pretty okay. What do you think? And now I'm recording with the Huawei P50 Pro and its main lens. It has a smaller sensor, slightly smaller sensor, like 1/1.5 inch size, smaller sensor. And otherwise I think it's pretty fine. 4K 30 as well. It can go up to 4K 60 as well. But the Xiaomi can go 8K, what we cannot sadly do here on the Huawei. I have the P50 Pro Kirin version, so it might be a little bit different on the Snapdragon version. Of course I can also go to the ultra wide angle here during recording. I can just simply zoom out, and now I'm at the ultra wide angle, and this is the ultra wide angle that also has autofocus, so it's pretty good as well for vlogging. I think it's a bit more wider eventually than the one on the Xiaomi, but we have to see how it will look like. How's dynamic range here? How is stabilization? And let's check out also the zoom, because we have a 3.5 times zoom that is supported by mono lens as well. So 1 time it switched lenses. Now we have 4 times it switched lenses as well. And I can go up to 15 times zoom. And it's also pretty stable, and I think maybe I see a little bit less details here, at least on the viewfinder, than on the Xiaomi. So the Xiaomi might have a better zoom lens. Of course, it has a 5 times optical zoom that it's cropping in here, and the P50 Pro only 3.5 times, and it's using the monochrome lens for adding some details here as well. So what do you think about this one here? We start off with the photos. On the left, always the Xiaomi 12S Ultra. On the right, always the P50 Pro. 5 times zoom, native for the Xiaomi, not native for the Huawei P50 Pro. It has to crop into the 3.5 times zoom lens. Very, very close and impressive by the P50 Pro. But you can see a little bit more detail on the Xiaomi 12S Ultra. Let's compare the main lens. Both very good. In terms of color, I think a bit more bluish kind of color on the P50 Pro and a little bit of more yellowish kind of color on the 12S Ultra. When it comes to HDR, I think the P50 Pro is beating the 12S Ultra. Look at the lifted shadows here and the details that you can see here under the bridge. That is much more, but it looks a bit processed on the P50 Pro for sure, and you can clearly see it here on the side as well. It's a bit blurry here and some details are lacking, especially in the tree, where here we still have all the details very nicely preserved. The ultra wide angle preserves the colors on both, so we still have both the same kind of HDR differences and color differences. So the P50 Pro looks a bit more detailed here, especially also towards the edges and here as well. When we take a look at the 3.5 times zoom on the P50 Pro and compare it to the 5 times native zoom, so native versus native, the Xiaomi 12S Ultra failed to focus here, even though I got a confirmation. I'm not sure where it was focusing because it doesn't look sharp in comparison to the P50 Pro that looks sharp from the top to almost the bottom, I would say. So very interesting here. The P50 Pro has, I think, a little bit better, sharper lens at the native zoom range. Another main shot, because someone was complaining I'm not showing a lot of main shots. Let's check this out. We have a bit of better HDR again, but a bit of bluish and more punchy color on the P50 Pro. We have this processing on the P50 Pro that is adding more details to the image. It looks a little bit artificial, where the Xiaomi 12S Ultra is not so sharp here and doesn't have so much details, but it looks little bit more natural for sure. When we take a look at the close focusing distance of the main lens, what we can clearly see is the Xiaomi 12S Ultra with its larger sensor. I have to step back a little bit to get this front of this flower sharp, and it is really sharp. On the Huawei P50 Pro I can get a little bit closer, so that I would almost call it macro photography here. And you can clearly see both have, in terms of sharpness, very good, and they have also this sharpness, this roll-off of bokeh. It's a bit stronger on the Xiaomi 12S Ultra for sure, but when you take a look at the bokeh itself at the background, because I'm so close with the Huawei P50 Pro, because I can get so close, it is almost the same. I would even say maybe the P50 Pro has a slightly better bokeh here than the P50 Pro, than the 12S Ultra. Then another native lens comparison, we can clearly see that the native lens here, the 1 times zoom, has better HDR again, and we see a difference in field of view, 27mm because of AIS on the P50 Pro, and on the Xiaomi 12S Ultra we have 23mm. When it comes to sharpness and details here, we can see a little bit more natural looking on the Xiaomi 12S Ultra. Look at the trees here, and a little bit more sprinkled in a bit of details on the P50 Pro, but it's artificially looking, especially if you compare them side by side. When we zoom in, we have the 5 times zoom comparison here, and this is pretty interesting because it's not native on the P50 Pro, but look at this, and yeah, it looks a bit better on the P50 Pro, a bit smoother than this one here, but very close together for sure. Some noise here on the Xiaomi 12S Ultra. When we can zoom into 10 times, I think also we can see some noise and some processing already. And on the P50 Pro, it stays very clean. Of course, yeah, it's a bit harder to read, but look at this sign here. Very close. And then we have, I think, sorry, this was 3.5 times. And this was 5 times. This is 10 times. But still, 10 times is, as you can see, a lot sharper. Then we come to the next one, which is 30 times, and here as well, noisy, you can see pixels. Here you can also see pixels very clearly, but you can clearly see as well the processing here is doing its job, and I think the P50 Pro has the edge in terms of processing. Now 120 times against 100 times, and again very clean on the P50 Pro and very sharp edges, where here we can see some pixels for sure. And I did a second shot, but no difference there. Ultra wide angle here again, what we can clearly see here towards the edges, a bit of blurry on the 12S Ultra, on the P50 Pro, a lot sharper for sure. We see the processing on the P50 Pro that the 12S Ultra doesn't have, but it's overall a little bit less sharp, the 12S Ultra. It's not only the processing that is working here, it is, I think, also the lens. Then we can clearly see as well on the ultra wide angle, again, a little bit better processing in the HDR. I think we have a bit of slightly overexposure here that we don't have here on the P50 Pro. Otherwise, the color difference is a bit more punchy on the P50 Pro for sure, and it looks a bit more artificial. Then looks pretty similar, doesn't it? But this is the native 5x zoom, and this is the hybrid zoom 10 times on the P50 Pro. Impressive, isn't it? Let's zoom in and compare. Yes, of course, you can see it looks more processed on the P50 Pro, but it's also not very good on the 12S Ultra with this 5x zoom, native zoom. You can see it looks a bit processed here, and something weird going on here with this boat for some reason. So let's compare 5x against 5x. 5x on the P50 Pro, also non-native. It's just using computational photography as a hybrid zoom. And here I would say it's on par. And that's simply amazing because the P50 Pro only has a 3.5 times zoom. So I would say the P50 Pro has the better zoom lens, and it can compete with the 12S Ultra's 5x zoom lens, which is pretty awesome. Nighttime photography, brighter picture always on the P50 Pro, a little bit more artificially processed, but the Xiaomi 12S Ultra is almost always unsharp for some reason. So here you can see it's blurry, and here it looks a bit, it's sharp and it looks a bit processed when I go towards the end here, but it looks better on the P50 Pro for sure. And when we take a look at the next shot, the same thing, a lot bright on the P50 Pro, a little bit artificially looking, and the Xiaomi 12S Ultra blurry. Where the Xiaomi 12S Ultra can redeem itself is the handling of lighter objects and night photography. What we can clearly see here, both not doing very great, but overexposure, we don't see overexposure so much on the 12S Ultra, where here clearly on the P50 Pro we can clearly see it. And even in the next shot, the same, basically a bit more over-processed here, looking on the P50 Pro, a little bit unsharp on the 12S Ultra, but handling lights a little bit better. 12 megapixels is the default, but when we want to use the full 50 megapixels, we can use it, and this is what we can see here. 50 megapixels with the 12S Ultra's 1-inch sensor, and 50 megapixels AI processed P50 Pro picture. So it has an AI mode where it's using also all the other sensors to gain information. And what we can clearly see here is the 12S Ultra usually should be better, but the processing of the Huawei P50 Pro is so good, so well, that it appears a bit sharper. It appears to be cleaner. It appears to be more detailed, as you can see here on the grip especially. It looks a bit processed for sure, but I think both look a bit processed. Look at the 55 and 35 here, and yeah, almost unreadable here. Look at the price tag here of the Deutschmark book that I still have here. A lot sharper on the P50 Pro. A bit processed here, where here it looks a bit more natural, where we have a bit more noise here, less noise here, but the book titles as well sharper on the P50 Pro. Everything looks a little bit sharper and cleaner on the P50 Pro. It's amazing, this AI what Huawei is doing here. So in general, what I can tell you is the 12S Ultra has on the main lens lots of potential. I think HDR is suffering a little bit and it's not winning against the P50 Pro. However, it has a more natural kind of look, where the P50 Pro already looks a little bit artificial or processed in some occasions. But this is like personal preference, I would say, because it's adding, of course, also a bit of more details in the P50 Pro shot. And if you don't need it, of course, you can use Pro mode, and then probably those will be gone. Otherwise, the ultra wide angle, I think the P50 Pro has a slight edge here in terms of sharpness. Of course, again, a little bit more processed looking, less sharp, a little bit more natural looking on the 12S Ultra. even though the HDR is not the best. So the same story as with the ultra wide angle. In terms of zoom lens, I think the P50 Pro is doing more and better things with the 3.5 times zoom than the 5 times native zoom on the 12S Ultra, though the 5 times of course native zoom should look a little bit better on the 12S Ultra, where the P50 Pro's 3.5 times zoom looks a bit better than the 5 times. So that's basically it for the photos. What do you think about my findings? In the darkness of the night, a small little test of the video capabilities of the Xiaomi 12S Ultra with this dim lit, very dark situation, 1-inch size sensor. It should work still fine. And this is, by the way, the internal microphone of the Xiaomi 12S Ultra. And now the photo wonder, the Huawei P50 Pro and its nighttime videography with its smaller kind of sensor but better computational photography. Is it better? Can it perform better than the Xiaomi 12S Ultra with its 1-inch size sensor? Also the internal microphones of the P50 Pro. What do you think? So, do we have a clear winner here? The Xiaomi 12S Ultra versus the P50 Pro. I'm super surprised by how good the P50 Pro can still hold up, and I would say it beats the Xiaomi 12S Ultra as well. What do you think about my opinion in video and in photography? Write it down in the comment section. That's everything for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Until the next time. Bye.